Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our panel discussion this evening, where we're going to answer your many questions about our reopening plans for fall of 2020. I'm here tonight with an esteemed panel. These are our co-chairs of our many subcommittees from our reopening planning team. And in a little bit here, we're going to have the opportunity to respond to the questions that you sent in after you had the chance to see our preliminary, I underline the word preliminary, reopening plan for fall 2020. I want to start first and foremost by just thanking you all for being here. I think there's probably a lot of people in our audience tonight watching this because this is a topic of tremendous import to our families and to our faculty and staff. And so we want to provide this opportunity for you to see our current thinking, to get your questions answered, and then I'm sure to inspire some additional questions going here. So thank you again for being here. I'm going to take a minute to introduce all of the folks who are on your screen, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to introduce everyone and ask them just to give a little wave in case the boxes move from what I'm looking at and what you're looking at. And I'm going to start with Dr. Damian Singleton, our Assistant Superintendent for Instruction. And next to him on my screen is Tim Murphy. He is our Safety Specialist. And next to Tim is Lisa Knowles, our Director of Pupil Personnel Services. And next to Lisa is Megan Beck, our Director of Food Services. And next is Danielle Poirier, our Director of Transportation. And next to her is Regan Johnson, our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources. And next to Regan is Mike Laster, our Principal of Farnsworth Middle School. And next to Mike is Mary Zwagerman. She is our head nurse and the school nurse at Guilderland Elementary School. And next to Mary, not coincidentally, is Alan Lockwood, the principal of Guilderland Elementary School. And right below Alan is Robert Winans. Bob is our instructional administrator for music. And next to Bob is Mr. Cliff Nooney. He is our director of facilities. And next to Cliff is Mike Piscatelli, Guilderland High School principal. And next to Mike is Rachel Anderson. She's our instructional administrator for math, science, and technology at Guilderland High School. And last but not least, the newest member of the team is Mr. Dave Austin. He is our new Director of Health, Physical Education, and Athletics. So a few days on the job, and he gets to be on a live screen panel discussion. So good job there. Okay, so to kick us off, I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to share with you shortly that really just sets the stage for the work that we've been doing, puts it in a little bit of context, and honestly answers a few of the questions that came in because we were monitoring those questions just as they arose. So please give me 1 second to bring up our PowerPoint. Okay. So as I said a moment ago, I'd like to welcome you to our live stream panel presentation to explore the questions that you asked about our preliminary reopening of schools plan. And I'm Dr. Marie Wiles, and I'm here with the co-chairs of our reopening task force subcommittees. So here's our agenda for tonight. We're going to spend a little time with a summary of our reopening of schools process. And then I'll spend some time just recapping the plan itself, the one that we shared with the community last week, Thursday. And that plan has categories that include health and safety, K-12 instructional programs, physical education and performing arts, extracurricular activities and athletics, and transportation. But the main part of our work tonight is to ask the questions that you shared with us and hear from our panelists some of the answers that we know. I guess I should make the caveat that there are some answers that we're still working on, but we have a little time still, fortunately. So in terms of process, in May, we created a reopening of schools steering committee. This was a small core of people who began meeting on Friday mornings. This was not long after our schools, we knew that our schools were not reopening for the rest of the 2019-2020 school year. Many of those people are on our panel tonight, but we began thinking about what fall of 2020 would look like, and very quickly realized that coming up with a plan to reopen our schools in the fall was going to be a monumental task with lots and lots of work and needing a lot more perspectives and voices and expertise to help us put that together. So in June, we created 6 reopening of schools subcommittees, and there's the list of them is included there for you. We have one for facilities, instruction, health and safety, social and emotional health, human resources, extracurricular activities, special areas, and athletics. And you can see it's over 120 stakeholders who have carved out time during June and July so far to help us think through what we're going to share with you. And those stakeholders include their teachers, their administrators, parents, and many, many community partners who have either medical or mental health, childcare, legal, human resources, or other relevant expertise. The group also includes our school medical director as well, who's been a tremendous help as we do this work. I just want to shout out to our teachers and our faculty and our employees and our parents, because when I reached out to say I'm looking for volunteers, I was overwhelmed with the number of people who wanted to participate in this work, and actually had far more people than we could fit on our committees. So a big thank you to all those who are serving, but also to those who also wanted to help out. So a little bit more about our process. In June, the school district sent out 3 surveys. We wanted to collect some insight from our faculty, our students, and our parents on how effective our remote learning experience was from March to June. As you know, we had a very abrupt shutdown and very quickly had to pivot to a completely remote educational experience. So we wanted to hear from you, and we had tremendous participation in those surveys, and that feedback has helped us in the work that we're presenting tonight. As a follow-up to the surveys, we also did some focus group discussions with both parents and students. We had 5 of those. Some of them were online. We actually had one session with a group of parents in person, which was a wonderful opportunity to actually spend some time with people, of course, socially distanced. And they gave us some terrific insight into their lived experience with remote learning during that period of closure. And then mid-July, we did another survey to our families, this one looking at the topics that you see highlighted there. We wanted to know a little bit about comfort level with using school district transportation in the fall, and comfort level with in-person instruction. We asked some questions about social and emotional support for our children. It included a section on extracurricular activities and athletics. It asked some questions about how well we communicated with all of you, and then it had a place for general questions and concerns. As you can see, we had close to 2,200 responses, and we really appreciate that feedback. Lots of people took time to not only answer the objective questions, but also to write in the comment area their narrative feelings and other expressions of their opinions. So we appreciate that. It's been helpful. And then on July 17th, which seems like a long time ago, but it was not long at all, we received the guidance for reopening from the State Education Department. And that guidance was what we needed to know exactly what it is we have to do and what are all the facets of that. And I just wanted to point out that one of the things, we had a lot of questions about the various formats for learning that are in our proposed opening plan. And I just wanted to point out that in the guidance, the school district is required to create a plan that includes both in-person, remote, and hybrid models of instruction. So we couldn't do just one of those. We have to plan for all of them as the contingencies of our circumstances might dictate later in the fall. But we had many questions about why not just do remote or why not just do hybrid? And the reality is we're required to do all three. So last Thursday, July 23rd, we released our preliminary plan. And with it, we sent out that questionnaire that asked for your questions. And as of right now, we have, actually it was 747, but the document is still open. So I'm quite sure we're gonna have a few more questions there, but we received about 750 questions for response and consideration. And I just want you to know that some of those questions have already impacted our preliminary plan, and I'll point those out as we go forward. July 28th, that's today, and we're doing what this is right now. It's our virtual panel discussion on the plan. And this feedback will help us for our next big deadline, which is Friday. We need to submit our reopening plans to the State Education Department. And that plan submission, just so you know, is actually a series of attestations that the superintendent that I need to make, saying that we're meeting all of the requirements, but the plan itself is a link to our website where the information will be housed. Why I mention that is because the plans will likely be fluid, and we may need to go back to our website and make some changes to that plan, and we will be able to do that more readily without submitting the full narrative document to a portal at State Ed. And then after we submit our plan, somewhere between August 1st and 7th, the governor is going to decide if schools will reopen. And I should say reopen in person, because school will reopen no matter what. It's just, what will it look like? So we have a formula that will dictate this. So a region can open. Again, this is a regional metric. It has to be in phase 4 of the reentry of the reopening plan for the state, and have a COVID-19 infection rate of 5% or less on a rolling 14-day average. Just so you know, we're right around 1, I think 1.2 on that average right now. And the governor pointed out that different regions are in different phases, and that if the infection rate goes over 9% on a 7-day average, schools will close. So, and they will be monitored in that distance between 5% and 9%. For all of you who are out there wondering, so what happens in between? So I'd like to right now take a minute to just recap the preliminary plan that you have had a chance to look at. And I just want to mention these 3 guiding principles that we used in thinking about this plan. And the first, really, I can't underscore it enough, is our concern with the health and safety of our students, faculty, and staff. That is our primary concern. You know, obviously, we're going to adhere to state level guidelines, and in some cases, we may exceed them. But the health and safety of our students, faculty, and staff is number 1. Second, we do want to maximize instructional opportunities for all students, but we're prioritizing in-person instruction to our youngest learners and those who need additional assistance. And we're doing that largely based on the feedback that we received from families and from faculty and staff that our youngest learners struggled quite a bit with remote learning during our period of closure, as did our students with disabilities and our E&L students and others who need additional assistance. And then the last one, you know, I say all the time to our leadership team, I hope you're comfortable with ambiguity, because we're in the midst of it here. So this is a plan with flexibility in mind. We're likely to need to make changes based not only on changing conditions with the COVID-19 outbreak, but also just the daily challenges that emerge as we flesh out the details of these plans. Every day, something new emerges that makes us rethink what we have on paper, and I anticipate that happening for the foreseeable future. So just a big caveat here, all in red, Guilderland red, this plan is a work in progress. Please anticipate changes. Please be patient with our changes. Changes will be made to better serve our students and to make sure we're keeping everybody safe. So having said that, I'm going to walk through quickly kind of the highlights of our plan. And I'm starting with this visual because the guidance that prescribed the fact that we need to maintain 6 feet social distancing in our classrooms is really the linchpin to everything else that followed. Knowing that we needed to have 6 feet between the places where students were working affected the number of classrooms we need and how many students will fit in a classroom, how many will fit in a building, et cetera, et cetera. So these are 2 classrooms in Westmere Elementary School, one with traditional desks, one with tables, and a rendering of what they might look like. These are actually the actual classrooms. These are photographs. And I'll just direct your attention to the upper left-hand photo, and you can see on the middle desks there is a 6-foot rod that Mr. Nooney used to do all the measuring. So that has been the yardstick for us. But this image and this guideline has been the start of everything. So with that 6 feet of space between individuals and in classrooms, that's approximately 14 students per classroom. And the approximation is a function of the size of the classroom. But on average, across our classrooms in Guilderland, it's 14 students. Another thing I want to point out here is face coverings. Face coverings are to be worn at all times, except when eating or during brief mask breaks, and they must be worn on the bus. I want to point out that in the preliminary release of this plan, it also included that students could take the mask off during instruction. We have removed that. And for the health and safety of all, we are going beyond the Department of Health guidelines here and saying that face coverings need to be worn at all times. Daily health screenings of all employees, students, and outside visitors will be done, and this is prior to coming to school. We will have an app that does this, that will ask all of these groups to answer 4 or 5 questions about their health conditions and whether or not they've traveled to one of the restricted states. And if the answers are all no, that information will be registered. If the answer is yes, they'll be directed to either a supervisor or an individual who will direct them on next steps. And just so you know, the actual data about what questions are answered isn't recorded, just whether or not an individual is cleared or not cleared. And then the next is we're going to be asking parents to be our partners in keeping everybody safe and to take their child's temperature prior to going to school. The temperature benchmark is 100 degrees. Greater than 100, the child should stay home. We all realize this is a heavy lift, but the prospect of taking everyone's temperature before they get on the bus is just not feasible. So we need our families to help us with this. So any student or staff member with signs of COVID-19 will be assessed and sent home for follow-up with a healthcare provider. We'll hear more about this later. There are questions on this. We have training protocols in place on proper hand washing and respiratory hygiene, facial coverings, social distancing, and symptoms of COVID-19. We'll have markings on the floor to help people know which direction to travel when they're in hallways or common areas. The number of visitors to schools will be greatly restricted, and school buildings will be cleaned and disinfected following CDC guidance. So the instructional program, we had a lot of questions about this, so I apologize if it wasn't clear in our original document, but a remote learning option will be available for all students K-12. That instruction will continue to be aligned to New York State learning standards. It will include both synchronous, meaning at the same time, and asynchronous, which means at different times, learning experiences. We're striving to use a single online learning platform to the extent possible for the ease of all. And we'll use a coordinated set of guidelines for teachers and students to help set expectations and routines for everybody as in that process. And then in the event of a school closure, instruction will transition to remote only learning. So let me talk a little bit about the various grade levels. So students in kindergarten through grade 6, we have daily in-person instruction. Because of that 6-foot requirement between desks, we can only fit K-4 in our home elementary school buildings. That's the reason for that. Grades 5 and 6 will be housed at Farnsworth Middle School. Many people asked about this, but our current grade 5 teachers will move with the students to FMS, and students will be placed with children from their own elementary buildings. We want to maintain as much as possible that feel of GES and LES and Pine Bush and Altamont at the middle school. And there are transition activities planned for the incoming 5th and 6th grade students. More information on that will follow. 7th grade, they're going to be remaining at Farnsworth Middle School, but because of the 6-foot requirement, we cannot fit the entire 7th grade in the building at the same time. So we're going to do an alternating model of half the 7th graders in person and the other half remote, and then alternating. Attendance will be taken both on-site and remote, and student work will be graded using traditional numeric grades calculated for activities, assignments, tests, and such. There will not be a DEL, NEL structure for grading. And then at the high school, we'll also be doing, we'll have grades 8 through 12 at the high school. We will have an alternating schedule. This time it'll be 2 consecutive days in person, followed by 2 consecutive days of remote. So that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday, then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And we're grouping grades 8 and 9 together, and then grades 10 through 12, and we'll alternate at home and in person. And again, daily in attendance, both in person and virtual, and again, grading will occur. Special programs, our students in self-contained special education programs, K-12, will be on site daily. Many of those children are on site right now at our extended school year program, doing fabulously. Students in grade 6, K-6, will receive special ed services as defined in their IEPs via daily in-person instruction. And our 7th graders will receive their special education services in a hybrid model. So that's both in-person and remote. And then our students who participate in co-teaching, consultant teacher services, resource rooms, tutorials will follow the same hybrid model as their general education peers and supported by their special education teacher or case manager. Physical education and performing arts. This is a challenging area. Right now, New York State guidance is recommending that we have 12 feet of physical distance between students for PE, singing, and playing a wind instrument. The district is continuing to study how to offer these programs safely. It is also an area of study in the broader field to see if 12 feet is the appropriate distance and or if there are other ways to mitigate any challenges associated with that. And then extracurricular activities and athletics. We want to offer as many of these as we can and do it safely. Extracurricular activities could be conducted or may be conducted virtually. And as for athletics, right now, interscholastic sports are not permitted. Start of the season has been delayed by New York State Public High School Athletic Association until at least September 21st, and we're awaiting further guidance. So getting kids back and forth to school and transportation, school bus drivers in attendance must wear a mask. Students are required to wear a face covering if they are physically able to. We'll plan for one child per seat. The exception to this is that siblings can sit together, and this is approximately 20 students per bus. Although we don't generally do this, we will encourage parents to drive students to and from school if they can, or if children are close enough to walk on a safe passageway, if feasible, to reduce the density. And there will be no late buses, and you'll see why when you see my next slide. We need to stagger the runs because of the fewer number of students that we can have on the buses. So K2 will have run from 7:30 to 1:45, 3-4, 8:15 to 2:30, 5-6, 9 to 3:15, grade 7 at the Farnsworth Middle School, 10 to 4:30, and grades 8 through 12 will also be 10 to 4:30. So it's too late for late buses, as you can see. So a couple more things. We're going to be needing some additional information from families. So very soon, you'll be receiving some communication from the district directing you to our eSchool data portal to answer a couple questions. We're going to be looking for families to tell us if they intend to have their children participate in remote or in-person learning. Right now, we're looking at a commitment for a semester-long decision in that respect. And a default choice would be in-person instruction. And then the other thing we need information about is the intent to have your children ride the school bus to and from school each day, and the default choice will be to ride the school bus. Okay, that was a lot of talking. I apologize for that. So at this point, we're going to get to your questions. As I said, we had 750 plus of them. So let me just talk a little bit about our plan for this. We have gone through all of the questions. I want to thank Amy Perrott, our communication specialist, and Deb Sim, my secretary, and Megan Beck, who jumped in to help with this because it was quite a lot. And we organized them into these categories. There was lots and lots of similar questions asked in different words, so we made themes, and we now have quite a few questions that I'm going to throw out to the panel in these categories. So each of the committee chairs has a list of questions. I'm actually going to read them to facilitate this, and then we'll answer absolutely as many questions as possible. You'll see at the bottom of the screen, we have created a separate email address, reopening@guilderlandschools.net, in order to post additional questions that you have. And last but not least, I just can't thank you enough for your patience and support. These are just remarkable times. There is no word for it. All kinds of challenges and all kinds of uncertainty, and there's just no way that it's good to work through challenge and uncertainty without your support and help. So we're looking forward to this opportunity to answer your questions. And I want to thank you for joining us. And I'm going to turn off the PowerPoint, and so we can go back to the panel. I'll take a breath, and then we'll start with your questions. So let me do that. Okay. Everybody still with me? All right. So we had the most questions about instruction. So Dr. Singleton, I'm going to start with you. And your colleagues can chime in as they see fit if there is additional information they want to start. But what I want to start with is a question about homeschooling and remote learning. There seems to be some confusion about that. So can you take a minute and explain the difference between remote learning, which we've built into our plan, and homeschooling?
Sure, and I do think it's a good starting point because there has been quite a bit of confusion around that, and understandably so. There are a number of terms that are being floated out there right now, one of them being remote learning. There's also the terminology home instruction that's out there, which is actually used by the state in some of their guidance documents. And then there's the term homeschooling. And I want to be clear that homeschooling is not anything new. That has been around for several decades now, and it basically affords parents the opportunity to assume the responsibility of providing the instructional program to their child at home, obviously. Again, this is not new, but it is something that comes with a pretty extensive process to gain approval to be able to do that. So a couple of things have to happen before a parent can be approved to be a homeschool instructor. They have to submit a letter of intent to the school district by a certain date. They have to provide the district with what is called an in-home instruction plan within 4 weeks of the time when they submitted their letter of intent. Their in-home instruction plan needs to comply with the Part 100 regulations established by the commissioner. And those Part 100 requirements basically outline the amount of instructional time, the process by which a parent would keep attendance, the required subject areas for which they must provide instruction. The parent would have to fully develop the instructional program for the student within those guidelines that are set forth from the state. Again, that said, it's nothing new. What is new, though, is as we are facing the 2020-21 school year in the world of a pandemic, the idea of remote instruction has come into play. And essentially what that means is the school district is still owning the responsibility or taking the responsibility to provide the instruction to the student, but doing so while the student is at home using various tools and technologies to be able to do so. So the primary difference is with homeschooling, the parent really is the primary instructor. With remote instruction or remote schooling, the school district and the teachers of the school district are still having the responsibility for providing the instruction. So I think it's an important distinction. I know in my office, I've already fielded a number of calls about homeschooling when the parent really was trying to ask a question about remote learning or remote instruction. So some clarification was warranted there. So I hope that helps to clarify.
It does, and it leads into the next question that we had about, it says, what resources, if any, will be provided to parents to help prepare them for the potential shift to online or remote learning only?
Okay, so thinking back to the spring months, March through June, we had a number of online resources that were available to parents to support their work at home. All of those tools will be available again in the fall should we have to revert back to online learning only. In fact, they'll be available even if we're in person, face-to-face learning. I think the key word within this question, though, is prepare. So the question is really, how will we help to prepare them for a potential shift to online learning? And reflecting back on the spring, we had a very abrupt shift to online learning. There really was no time at all to prepare parents for that instruction that would take place at home. So throughout the month of August, we have prepared and scheduled a number of what we're calling parent universities. And these parent universities will be opportunities to engage parents in a little bit more of a deeper conversation to prepare them for use of tools like Google Classroom, Google Docs, Seesaw at the elementary level, etc. Our coordinator for instructional technology will be the primary facilitator of those parent universities, and the dates will be posted on our website for parents to sign up. We're also in the process of providing some additional guidance documents for parents. Again, those will be posted on the website as well. Kind of the to-do lists or how-to lists will be there for parents to access as well.
Another question that we have asks about assessments. And the question is, will you be doing the usual assessments? I'm not sure what usual means. I'm wondering if this is about state assessments.
I'm guessing that's a part of it, but let me just start with basic classroom-based assessments. Yes, we will definitely be implementing classroom-based assessments, and that would include for students who are working remotely at home. Teachers will be assessing progress and growth by our students. As far as state tests and Regents exams, to this point, to this date, they have not been waived for next year. So we are planning to administer those tests as we have in past years. Of course, that may well change as we go forward, especially if we do have to go remote and close schools one more time. So at this point, those have not been waived for us for the 2021 school year.
What about attendance requirements? I mentioned in the presentation that we will be taking attendance, but a parent asked, will attendance guidelines be adjusted?
So similar answer, attendance guidelines are typically dictated by the state through regulations as well as through the Every Student Succeeds Act. At this point, we have not received any flexibility on attendance guidelines, so we will be taking attendance for students both in person and also for remote learning as well to ensure that our students are engaged and participating fully. So that is a bit of a shift from the spring months. We will be taking attendance for students as they work from home remotely.
Here's one about elementary students. Will elementary students find out their teachers sooner this summer so they can video chat with their teachers?
So good question. I would say it's fair to say that we are trying to honor a similar timeline as we have in past years. I don't anticipate it would be any sooner this year. If possible, that would be great, but I think we're likely to adhere to a very similar timeline from past years. As far as the opportunity to video chat with their teachers, I'm assuming that means video chat with their teachers before the start of the school year. And that opportunity is certainly available to them. We cannot require it of our teachers, though, but if they do wish to engage with their students through some informal video chatting before the start of the school year, that's certainly available to them.
Okay, thanks.
Damien, I would just add that I'm anticipating a slight delay in the placement announcements. Typically, we try and get those out in the first week of August. But right now we have a lot of work to do to create cohorts of 14, and we want to do that work well, making sure that we're using, what we know about the students and what we've received from parent requests up to this point. So that's going to take us a little bit of time and probably will not be ready by August 7th. Okay,
thank you, Alan.
Mm-hmm. We have another question about what students will do because this is getting to the 14 cohort question. What will students be doing when they are not with their teacher but being supervised by other staff? Okay. So we're dividing sections to get social distancing.
Right. So I think first and foremost, I want to make sure that everyone understands that it is our intention to have students fully engaged in learning in either space. It is not simply a matter of supervision. So one of the challenges that is in front of us, in particular for our principals, is thinking about the staffing that is in those alternate spaces, I would say. At this point, we are striving to make sure that we have certified instructional staff in each of those spaces, able to carry out instructional activities and learning opportunities for students in those spaces. That may well be a mix of teachers, specialists, teaching assistants, etc., but all whom have instructional backgrounds and will be able to support that. In instances when we are just stretched from a staffing perspective, I think we will make sure that we have additional supports available to that teacher. Again, whether it be a reading teacher or a math specialist or someone else who can collaborate and support students if they are not face-to-face with the teacher in another room. The other option that's available to us is to be able to stream or cast instruction from one room to another. So if a teacher is delivering some teacher-directed instruction or a mini lesson, that can be cast from one space to another so that our students are able to receive that instruction directly from the classroom teacher with the support of the other instructor in the alternative space.
Thanks, Damien. I've got a couple high school questions, or middle high. One question asks about science labs and what they may look like in the upcoming year.
Okay, and I'll let Rachel jump in here because she's the high school science supervisor. But at this point, because we will have students on site, we will likely be able to facilitate science labs with all of our social distancing and health and safety requirements in place. It will be tricky for sure, there's no doubt about that. But from a facilities perspective, we will have our students on site for the most part. Where we can't facilitate a true lab, we also have the opportunity to provide virtual labs for students. We do have software programs called Vernier. We're looking at Explore Learning as another option, but just some additional options that would allow us to provide lab experiences virtually. Rachel, I'll let you jump in if you have anything to add.
Sure. So the Regents normally has a 1,200-minute requirement for hands-on science labs that have to be completed before a student can sit for a science Regents exam. That 1,200-minute requirement is still in place currently, but they have allowed that instead of being all hands-on lab, it can be some virtual lab as well. So to go to what Damien said, that's where we're looking into some of those platforms. Another issue that we're addressing is lab safety. Traditionally, we do share lab equipment. So we've been working with the high school and the middle school combined, have been working on creating a situation where at least some of those lab materials can be on site in the high school to provide for grades 7 through 12, so that instead of having, say, 12 microscopes in a class, we could have a full class set of 24 over the 2 lab rooms that students would be in. So again, talking about splitting a class that's typically 24 into 2 classrooms of 12 and having a microscope for each student. That way we could sanitize between classes. So those are the sorts of solutions we're looking at to try to keep the lab as safe as possible.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Here's another high school one. It says, my child is taking an advanced course with a grade level that is in session on a different day. How will that work, if we know yet?
So do you want to take that, Mike?
I can try to answer it. The answer is right at this moment, we don't know exactly how we're going to handle that, but we right now are going to analyze each of these courses on a case-by-case basis and come up with plans of how we're going to address it. We've got several ideas of, do we have to try to create a section, like if it's a 9th grader in a 10th grade class, do we have to look at opportunities to create a section that's taught on the 9th grade days? Do we have to look at other options of shifting a student into a different class? Those are different aspects of it that we have to look at as we're going through this, because we do have several classes where we have mixed grade levels. So we've got right now, one of our tasks is for our instructional administrator staff is to look at each one of those sections and come up with ideas and plans of how we're going to address it.
Thanks, Mike. I think it's one of the many things we still need to sort out. Here's one more high school question about BOCES CTE programs. Will students still have the opportunity to participate in those?
We're still getting information about what the CTE schedule is, and they're kind of in the beginning stages as well. We do know, at least right now, they're planning on a similar schedule to what they did last year, which we're going to have to figure out how we problem solve around that, because that would mean the morning CTE students would shift back to the high school and would have a layover period that we would have to figure out before the afternoon sessions would start. The afternoon sessions is a little more problematic, and right now we're just trying to figure out how we're going to handle that. But our hope is that as the BOCES programs get more information about what area schools are doing, that may result in some shifts in their schedule too.
Thanks, Mike. And while we're talking of students going out of district, Lisa, maybe you can address a question about what will Guilderland do about out of district placements for students with disabilities?
Well, currently information is trickling in from our out-of-district providers, and as we did in the fall and this summer, we will continue to work with our placements and our families to support the programs developed by each placement. So each out-of-district program will be working on its own in-person or hybrid type instruction, and then we will be working alongside them and the families to ensure our students' needs are met.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Let's do one more in instruction and then maybe move on to another area and double back if we have time. And Damien, I'm going to direct this one to you. And the question is, what other plans were considered in terms of the framework that we have? And the question writer asks, wouldn't a half-day plan make more sense?
So, yeah, I mean, I think there is an argument that a half-day plan has some merit for sure. And it has been discussed quite extensively. In fact, it's still being discussed. I'll be honest with you. It's still a topic of conversation with the instruction task force about what that might look like. I think as we reflect back on some of the feedback that we've received, both from other task forces as well as through the surveys, et cetera, a half-day model would be very challenging for a number of parents who have to have essentially a full day so they are able to work their various jobs. So we noted that challenge right up front. We also, I believe, and this was a conversation more so with the facilities committee and with Danielle, having midday bus runs on top of all of the other transportation challenges that we faced seemed to be a very difficult hurdle for us to be able to achieve. Now, that being said, as I mentioned, we are still discussing some half-day instructional models, I would say, on our instruction task force that are really looking at ways that we can chunk the day, but having students be physically present in school for the full day, but thinking about instructional chunks or blocks of time that would enable us to do some things that are similar to a half-day instructional model. So that's still a conversation that we're having right now.
Thanks, Damien. Maybe a good segue over to some facilities discussion, and I'm going to turn to Mr. Nooney. One of the questions here is about Y time, and I know our friend from the YMCA, Mr. Matthew Scarab, was on your facilities committee, and this individual wants to know, will there be an after-school program? Will there be Y time, and can aftercare be offered at Linwood?
Yes, we have had discussions with the Guilderland Y. They are actually going to expand their site licenses across the district. So we're going to include Altamont, Linwood, and Farnsworth. And we are also currently discussing, based on our bus schedule, are there possibilities of a before school as well as after school Y-time childcare programs.
Great. While we're talking about little ones, here's another question about recess. And will there be outside recess on the playgrounds for elementary students? And the questioner went on to wonder about fifth graders at FMS without a playground.
At this point in time, yes, I believe we will have recess. The CDC guidance on any kind of disinfecting on outdoor areas is basically, they've said, is kind of ineffective and not proven. So, and as far as fifth graders at Farnsworth, no, we won't have a playground, but there are definitely other opportunities for our young people to explore. We have a pond area out back that can be tied into instruction, organic garden, our butterfly courtyard, project adventure, many new opportunities for our fifth grade students.
All right, thanks, Cliff. Let's move from outside to inside, but stay on the air conversation. So Cliff, there was question about ventilation systems in the buildings and whether or not they need to be upgraded. And I'm wondering if you could respond to that and comment on other ventilation-like issues. I know that's a big topic.
Yes, it is a big topic. Just a little segue, there's a large component of our capital project that includes new HVAC systems across our school district. Fortunately, there's no way that's going to happen in the next 30 days. The guidance is very general from New York State Department of Health, saying our systems need to meet or exceed their current design. I have been working with our architects and engineers. In general, our systems exchange air in a classroom 4 times per hour. Some spaces are a little less, some spaces are a little more. It depends on the size of the space, age of the system. In those discussions with the engineers, we think we can get to a 5 times per hour exchange of air in our rooms, which will increase our airflow, as well as we're having discussions around our filters. When you talk MERV rating, a MERV rating is basically the density of the filter, how dense the filter is. The higher the number, the denser the filter. So a MERV 13 would be the highest density filter. We currently run MERV 8 filters. We're reviewing potentially being able to go to a 9, possibly 11. Our systems, if we were to install MERV 13 filters, we would not move any air in our systems. They're not designed for that type of filter. So a lot of discussions and work, and we'll also be tying in our building management system software providers into that discussion, because that'll be a big part about how we control our dampers.
Cliff, I'm going to stick with you and ask you to talk a little bit about our cleaning protocols for buildings, and if you can maybe talk about the kinds of materials or products that we use to clean and disinfect.
Protocols, I mean, it's still a work in progress as we build our schedules and see how we're going to be set up in our buildings. That will dictate kind of what our protocol, probably more schedule is like. Part of the guidance is we have to create a log. So we will be logging all our cleaning activities. Any products we're going to be using are going to be on the EPA approved COVID-19 effective list, meaning they attack and kill the virus. We have invested in equipment for our custodial staff to help facilitate that process, basically make it faster for commonly touched surfaces. We will be providing cleaning supplies to all of our classrooms. Basically every space in the school district will have access to disinfectants and dry wipes. Currently, like a Clorox wipe or anything like that is very difficult to procure right now on our scale. So the protocols are a work in progress. An example, just to give the community example, maybe when we look at our bigger buildings and our gang bathrooms, I foresee a rotation in those where they would be closed down once or twice a day. We'd be going in to clean those, open them back up. The staff would know what bathrooms would be open and which ones would be closed, just as an example.
Okay, great. Thank you, Cliff. In this area, Tim, I'm going to call on you. There's a question about how fire safety will be handled.
Yeah, fire safety will still be maintained. We'll still have fire inspections. We'll still have systems we have to maintain throughout our schools. We will continue to have the same number of required fire evacuation drills. The difference with our drills will be through state ed guidance, we'll be staggering the evacuation drills across rooms and sections of the school so that we can maintain social distancing. Kids won't be ganging up as they're leaving the building. Students and staff will also be instructed that in the event of a true evacuation, the life safety focus would be on getting everybody out of the building quickly. So yes, fire safety will still be maintained.
Well, that's maybe a nice segue over to safety related questions. So why don't I stick with Tim, and I think Mary, you're going to help as well. And we have a question about what constitutes an acceptable face covering, and can shields be used instead of masks?
Okay, the acceptable face coverings, as far as, New York State Department of Health, they say that acceptable face covering includes a cloth-based face covering, homemade, sewn, quick cut or bandana style. Also the surgical masks, the disposable masks that we have in stock. face coverings need to cover both the mouth and the nose. And State Education Department recommends that a cloth face covering be made of a tightly woven fabric, preferably cotton, with multiple layers. Now, you can wear a face shield, but State Ed also says that if you wear a face shield, you're supposed to wear a mask beneath that.
All right, thank you. Part of our plan requires that we do a daily health assessment, including taking the temperature of children. So the question is, will parents be required to take the temperature of their children before sending them to school each day?
Yes, parents will be required to take their temperature as well as fill out the BOCES app daily, which includes a short questionnaire.
Okay, great. So are all staff members being trained around, or will they be trained around these safety protocols and measures that we need to maintain?
Yes, all staff will receive basic COVID-19 training. It will include topics like staying home when you're sick, what the symptoms of COVID-19 are, proper hand and respiratory hygiene, and face coverings. We'll also have supplemental training at the building level and perhaps at departmental level as the COVID-19 pandemic evolves.
And I know we have 3 conference days at the start of school to build in some time for some of that training too.
Good.
Mary, this one might be for you. How will students and staff members with suspected symptoms of COVID-19 be handled?
So good evening, everybody. So if a student or a staff member has symptoms of COVID-19, they're going to be put in an isolation room in each building. And we're working on designating that space currently now. We're trying to keep it close to the nurse's office, but that area will be supervised by a staff member, and the parent will be notified and required to pick that child up. We're hoping that to lessen the amount of time that the student would be spending in the building. And that parent would be advised to contact their primary care physician.
So what happens if a student or a staff member tests positive for COVID-19? What happens then?
So if a student or staff member tests positive, the Department of Health needs to be notified, so we would be doing that. And we would be working directly with the Department of Health and taking direction from them.
So yes, we've worked closely with them before. They're great partners. So will testing be required, COVID-19 testing be required before all staff return to school?
No, we have no requirement of that.
So children and others get ill with other things besides COVID-19. So how will other illnesses be handled in the schools?
So, what we would do is typical nursing assessment. A lot of our students, the nurses have a good idea of who in their building has a current medical condition. They work very closely with families, parents, but we would do our assessment and, review that and certainly come to any decisions that we needed to do. Taking into account that, it may be their like say a student has asthma, so and they're presenting with, asthmatic symptoms. We would typically know those students, so we would work with that information. Yeah.
Thank you.
And guidelines, yeah.
So we've heard a little bit about this app that we'll have soon. We're using a homegrown version of it with our extended school year right now. But how will students who have not submitted their temperatures be handled if they haven't when they get to school? And will there be some kind of an alert that goes to you and your colleagues that particular students didn't have their temperatures taken? How will we handle that?
So we're currently in the process of working through the details on that, but the principals in the building will be notified of the students that parents did not do the screening prior to coming to school, and those students would be screened by the school nurses.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we hear a lot on the news about quarantines for individuals traveling from certain states. And we do have a question on our app that asks families, have you traveled from any one of, I don't know, 35 states now we're up to? And the question is, how will we enforce that for families who have traveled to those states?
Well, the travel quarantines will be included as one of the questions on the app that the parents need to attest to daily. So every day the parents will need to let us know whether or not they've been to one of those areas.
And we have to trust them to be forthcoming with us.
Yes, and on some level we always will, yeah.
As good community members, yes. And Tim, while I have you, you can respond to this next one. And that's, how exactly will lockdown drills occur while everyone is physically distancing 6 feet? Because as you know, in lockdown drills, pre-COVID-19, everyone clustered very close together in one corner of the building, of the classroom.
That's an excellent question. I'm glad that State Ed gave us some guidance on it, and we'll try to get that information out to more people as we get closer to reopening. But in spaces where you can't get out of sight of that door window without compromising social distancing, that lockdown drill can become more instructional in nature. That the teacher can walk the students through, just showing them where they would go, what corner of the room they might go to during a lockdown. So it doesn't necessarily have to be packing all the students into that one corner as much as it is just explaining to them what they would do in a true lockdown. And also students and staff will be reminded during each of those drills that in an actual emergency requiring a lockdown, that the most imminent concern would be getting them into that corner and disregarding social distancing for that actual emergency.
So you're weighing the risks, in other words.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. All right, let me move on to another kind of health and wellness that's related to nutrition. And Megan, Beck, let me turn to you. And there's a question: how will breakfast and lunch be handled at each of the buildings?
So State Ed is asking us to make breakfast and lunch available to all students, regardless whether they are remote learning or they are in the building or they are in that mix of hybrid that we're kind of seeing for our 7 through 12 students. Those that are in the building daily will be provided breakfast and lunch if they choose to purchase it. Breakfast will be in the classroom. I'm working with all of our principals on coming up with models on how we're going to work through that. I'm thinking in the elementary schools it will be delivered. In middle and high school we'll probably pick up at a kiosk and go back to their rooms. Lunch again will also be in the classroom via either delivery, coming down to pick it up from the cafeteria. We are going to move towards an ordering format where lunches will be ordered ahead of time. In the elementary schools, it will be a Google Sheet that classroom teachers will do, and in the middle and high school, it will be via a new app that we are rolling out that works hand in hand with the app that we have now for our prepayment system.
And then how will food be handled? And I guess I'm thinking about sanitary and health and safety considerations around that.
So all of our staff is being completely retrained in our Serve Safe program, which is a nationwide National Restaurant Association program. They will all be recertified in that, along with being part of the COVID training that we are putting all of the staff in the school through. CDC has done research and seen that COVID, it's not highly transmitted through food, but we are going to do the best we can, making sure everything is sanitary, clean, and we're limiting the exposure of the food. It's also going to be going out to classrooms covered, so there's no option or no ability of any contamination after it leaves the kitchen.
So I know one of the key directives around food and eating is wash your hands before and after. And so there's a question, and maybe this can go to Cliff, and it says, do all classrooms have sinks for hand washing?
The short answer to that is no, but it kind of works backwards as we go up. Elementaries do. I would go 99%. Middle school has a very good portion as well, especially if you count science rooms. Get into actual classrooms at the high school, probably percentage-wise is the least. With that being said, we are currently stocked to provide hand sanitizer to every single space in the school district as an alternative, as well as, in our other buildings, they still have the options to use our bathroom sinks as well.
Okay, thanks, Cliff. All right, I'm going to transition to transportation at this point. And Danielle, my first question to you is, did I get everything right in the slides that I presented earlier in terms of scheduling and numbers of students and all of those things?
Yes, you did. But like everything else, I guess everything's subject to change. But as of now, yes, you did.
Awesome. What about cleaning the buses? We have a question. So how is that going to happen? When is that going to happen?
The buses will be cleaned between the morning and the afternoon runs at the bus garage. We have a combination of an electrostatic sprayer and sanitary wipes. Also, the drivers will have sanitary wipes on the buses, and if time permits, they will do the touched surfaces on the buses in between bus routes.
Okay, great. There was also in the guidance that we received that children and bus drivers and attendants must wear masks on school buses. And someone asks, how will mask wearing and social distancing be enforced on the bus?
Well, it's going to be a new expectation for our students as well as our staff. I will be monitoring the staff, and the bus drivers and attendants will be monitoring the students on the bus, reminding them that they have to have them. And if by chance a student tries to board a bus without a mask, we will have masks available for them.
That's great. We also had a question, we've decided that we're asking parents to take students' temperatures before they get on the bus. But can you talk a little bit about why we're not taking them as students get on the bus?
Well, primarily because of time. It would require more time for the driver to take the temperature. And also, logistically, it would be very difficult for a driver to take temperatures at a stop with many students and or a stop on one of our major roads, such as Western Avenue, Carmen Road. It's not safe and it's very distracting for the driver. So it's best that it's done prior to them even getting to the bus stop.
All right, thanks for that clarification. And then, did you add any bus routes in your plan?
As of now, no, we have not. We really don't have the staff to do that, and we actually added another tier to the bus routes to accommodate for, our 20 students on a bus. We're cutting our ridership in less than half.
Okay. So the last one about transportation has to do with drop off and entry to school, which can be very busy. What's the plan? What will that look like at our buildings?
Well, when the buses arrive, I think it'll be very typical. They'll all be in place before we start to unload. And in terms of the students getting off the bus, it'll start from front to back, one student at a time, to allow for social distancing. It'll be very organized and orderly. Once they hit the sidewalk, it'll be up to the schools. I'm sure there'll be plenty of staff from the schools out on the sidewalks waiting to receive the students to maintain social distancing.
That's great. I've noticed in extended school year, we have a nice system there for getting children off the bus and where they need to be, and lots of staff. So I think you're right about that.
Yes, if we're lucky, our school year will go as well as summer school has gone.
I'm sure it will. I'm knocking on wood.
I hope so.
So I'm going to transition now over to some questions about students and faculty and staff social and emotional well-being. And I'm going to turn to our PPS director, Lisa Knowles. And first question is kind of general. How will we address the social and emotional health of our staff and students?
Well, that is a big question. Good evening, everyone. And I've had the opportunity to work with a rock star team of 20 people on our subcommittee. And the foundation of our work is really about building relationships routines, and resilience for our students and our staff. In any of the guidance documents, the mental wellness of our students and staff is a high priority as we look toward reopening. We know this has been a very challenging time for many of our faculty, staff, and students and families, and we really want to ensure that we are prepared when they come back to us. And our work is really focused on 3 areas: instructional practices and staff support, our multi-tiered system of supports, and our family and community supports. So we are creating a series of professional development opportunities for faculty and staff that will really look at social emotional learning practices, advocacy, self-care, resilience, and building that classroom community as we return our students back to in-person and hybrid learning environments, and building in interventions and supports and resources for our students, our families, and ensuring we have adequate resources to support our families to help prepare their children to return to school.
You have been busy in your committee, I think it's clear. So Lisa, we had a lot of questions about transition years. So children entering kindergarten, our 5th graders moving up to Farnsworth Middle School, our 8th graders moving up to the high school. So can you talk a little bit about how we can make those transitions that are different than we would have expected or anticipated positive for those learners at those 3 age levels? And your colleagues can jump in here if they'd like.
Yes, and I think recognizing that change is hard, and we have some unexpected changes to student placements, but I think every building is really working hard to welcome their new learners to their buildings, and we'll be discussing opportunities for transition days and ways that the students can visit their elementary or the middle school or the high school as long as we follow safe protocols. So we'll be working with various levels to see how we can do that. I think it's also realizing our students take our cues from us, and our worries as parents and teachers, our kids pick up on that. So as best as we can is to foster that resilience and recognize that we're in this together, and then we're going to be working through some things. And we will be sharing resources with families about conversations about what school will look like when we return. And I think being factual and sharing information and looking at what are some new opportunities that can arise from being in a different building earlier than anticipated. So we're really looking at those transition years and taking extra care when we're discussing and planning for those students.
So why don't I turn to Alan, Mike, and Mike just to say a couple words about your plans for Alan. Let's start with our youngest learners, your plans for welcoming our kindergarten students to our buildings.
Well, every year we try and invite our incoming kindergarten students to come spend some time with us in June. So they can get to know us and they can get a tour of the facilities. Parents can get a tour of the facilities, and we can start to learn about each other. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that this year as our buildings were closed. But now that we are starting to open things up, all the elementary schools right now are planning to have some sort of kindergarten visitation day prior to the start of the schools. Now, once the school year starts, the teachers are planning to spend a great deal of time just building relationships with students and making sure that they are transitioning well into the school routine, and learning how to do their job of being kindergarten students. Much the same with our first, second, third, and fourth grade students. A great deal of time is going to be spent at the beginning of the year welcoming people in, taking time to assess any social emotional needs, and really working to build the classroom communities that we know are so important to learning.
That's awesome, Alan. Thank you. Mr. Laster, what will be the plan for, you've got 2 grades transitioning into your building, 5th and 6th.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, isn't it? Back in June, we communicated to our incoming 6th grade families that we were hoping to have a virtual transition evening soon after we announce our student placement and their homerooms and their teams, followed by, if we could safely do this under CDC guidelines, open up the building for some self-guided independent tours. We anticipate having to change that date. We originally were shooting for August 10th, but as Dr. Lockwood spoke a little bit earlier, with the pushback of that announcement, we're going to have to change the event of those transition evenings. And as you noted, it's now for 2 grade levels and two cohorts of families. So we're pretty excited to double the number and welcome all of those 5th and 6th grade families and students to Farnsworth Middle School.
All right, thanks, Mike. Mike Piscatelli, you've got 2 grades transitioning in too, 8th and 9th.
Yeah, we're excited about it. And a lot of the same activities that we've heard about, we're going to be doing the same thing. We did do a virtual event for our incoming 9th graders earlier in the summer that went well. But now, as we are transitioning 8th and 9th grade, we have invited 8th grade parents and 9th grade parents to participate and students participate in some virtual events that are going to happen in August, mid-August timeframe. And then we also have tours planned for the end of August. We're also in discussions right now about what we may do those first couple days of school with the incoming 8th and 9th graders. They might be a little bit different than our traditional first days of school. So, like I said, we're excited about having 2 grades transitioning as well.
And I'm looking forward to participating. Lisa, back to you. I want to ask about, we had a question about working with students who have significant behavioral challenges, students who may run, students sometimes hide. Our faculty and staff sometimes struggle with these kinds of behaviors, even in the best of times. And as we know, we're really not in the best of times right now. So how can we support them?
Well, I think this is a multi-leveled approach, and certainly recognizing and doing some work ahead of time to really look at what students we historically know who have difficulty with transitions back to school or have historically maybe had some challenges, but there also may be students who over the time away from school have had some adjustment challenges. So we will be on the lookout. And I think, as Alan mentioned, it's really that building that culture and climate in the classroom and a positive rapport and really getting to know your students first, and then kind of phasing in our instructional expectations, you know, as you rebuild those relationships. And we certainly continue to have our staff who are trained and available to support and work with our teams, our psychologists, social workers, school counselors, special education teachers, teaching assistants are not new to these behaviors and will be working really well and problem solving with teams to support these students.
That's good to hear. You know, one more group of people whose social emotional well-being we have to think about are all of the adults who are doing this work under very stressful conditions. So how will staff mental health, stress, anxiety be addressed? How will we support our own?
Well, certainly that's been a topic of conversation of our subcommittee, and really knowing that if our staff are doing and feeling well, or we'll feed down to our students. And so we have our employee assistance program for staff who need support in any of those areas, but we're also planning to provide some internal professional development about self-care and fostering healthy work and home boundaries, and where our staff can get support. And our psychologists, social workers, and school counselors are really in tune to their building needs, and will be available as coaches almost to help their colleagues and students navigate through this reentry.
That's great. And we do have an outstanding employee assistance program that has a wealth of resources that's available to everyone confidentially. So that's a good thing to remind everyone about. You know, one important aspect of our students' connectedness to schools, which is an important part of their health and social, emotional and social well-being, is their participation in things like extracurricular activities and athletics and special areas. So let me turn to that now. And Bob Winans, I'm going to start with you. We've had a lot of questions about how the visual and musical arts will be handled in the various grades?
It's a big question, and I will attempt to be as brief as possible. So at the elementary level, music and art will push into classrooms to minimize the movement of cohorts, trying to keep students in the spaces that they're typically in. Instrumental lessons will still take place. We will maintain proper social distancing, personal protective equipment, cleaning and disinfecting, and hand hygiene protocols. So we'll be taking all that into consideration with instrumental lessons. Elementary ensembles are temporarily on hold because late buses are not available. At the middle school level, it's still being discussed whether or not general music and art will push into classrooms or students will go to the music and art rooms. That's still in discussion. Both the 7th and 8th grade will have elements of in-person and remote instruction due to the hybrid schedule. Again, instrumental lessons will still take place, maintaining proper social distancing, cleaning and disinfecting, etc. And we're in the process of determining what middle school ensembles will look like for next year, taking into consideration the large number of students and the need for proper social distancing. At the high school level, normal high school music and art classes will still be held. Though musical ensembles, like for the middle school, we're looking at how to do this in a manner that maintains proper social distancing. Instrumental and vocal lessons will still take place with all the things I mentioned earlier. In general, if we determine that we can't conduct an ensemble in a socially distant manner based on the large number of students in our program, which is a wonderful problem to have, we will use ensemble time to teach portions of our curriculum that don't require performing. And in this situation, there will be a greater emphasis on individual skills and small group performances that are born out of the instrumental and vocal lesson groups. We're also exploring alternate rehearsal locations, utilizing bigger spaces such as cafeterias, the LGI, et cetera, and scheduling in order to make ensembles possible. Safety obviously is our #1 priority in all of this. So speaking of safety, we will be using the 12-foot social distancing with masks for singing and playing wind instruments, which includes winds and brass. String instruments are allowed to use 6-foot distancing, but will wear masks as well. We are exploring other mitigation techniques, such as the use of bell covers for wind and brass instruments to further reduce the spread of aerosols, which is recommended by the International Coalition Performing Arts Aerosol Study, which is a comprehensive study that's currently being conducted. Whenever possible, equipment will not be shared. If equipment has to be shared, proper cleaning and disinfection will take place in between use, and students and faculty will use proper hand hygiene before and after the contact of shared equipment. Until further notice, there will be no in-person events or assemblies. So concerts, theatrical performances will not take place in person. So in the meantime, events that can be done virtually will be held virtually. So we'll hold virtual concerts and other performances and other events.
Thank you for all that work, Bob. I know your committee has a lot on its plate with a lot of variations on a theme. But that's appropriate, I suppose, for the musical group, right?
Very good.
So Dave, what about physical education? We have a question about what that will look like and whether children will have to wear masks during PE.
Good evening. Kids will have PE, both in person and remote, if we are able to reopen under the hybrid model. And it will look different. There's no doubt about it. PE will look different, more so than it's ever looked before. We will have kind of some staples that we will be following as much as we possibly can, such as we are going to be outside early and often. We are going to focus on activities that allow for physical distancing. And as Bob mentioned, the requirement for 12 feet, that applies for physical activity as well that requires cardiorespiratory activity. So for the most part, phys ed classes will be sticking to the 12 feet social distancing. We will have masks on during physical education. If we are outside and we are able to maintain 12 feet of distancing or more, that is a conversation that we haven't really had yet, but we are open to discussing whether or not kids will be required to wear masks if they're over that 12 feet of physical distancing when they're outside. But our focus for phys ed this year is going to be on low risk, non-contact activities that require little equipment. But without a doubt, we are going to, we have a tall task as phys ed teachers. We are going to have to be really creative with our curriculum this year.
As we always are, but now by dire necessity. So my last couple questions around this category are around interscholastic sports, which we know are currently not permitted and at best to begin on September 21st. But we have a question that if a student opts for virtual learning only, will they still be able to participate in sports?
Sure. And as you mentioned, you know, right now the only planning that has been made for interscholastic athletics is that we have postponed the start of the fall sports season until September 21st. So we are hopeful that we are able to offer our full menu of our athletic offerings this year. And certainly if we aren't able to go on September 21st, the New York State Public High School Athletic Association has already laid the groundwork for condensed seasons starting in January if we are unable to go, as I mentioned, on September 21st. To answer your question specifically about virtual learning, if students opt for virtual learning only, will they still be able to participate in sports? Yes, 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 yes. We would not have it any other way. Obviously, there would be some planning and some hurdles to kind of cover, and we haven't gotten to those yet. But we will make sure we do that because we wouldn't have it any other way.
So that, can I presume that students who are on our remote 2 days in, 2 days out would be able to go to practice on the days when they're on remote learning too?
That is correct.
Okay, great.
And extracurricular activities will, you know, if students who are doing remote learning will be allowed full participation in extracurricular activities as well.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, we have one more category, and it's around some questions around human resources. And I think it's going to call on a few of you to look at this. So we had one question, and maybe either Mike or Alan will want to look at this one. Who will be the principal of my 5th grader at FMS?
Well, I'm pretty excited to let you know that I am the lucky recipient to be the primary principal, but of course I will be consulting with my elementary colleagues. We at the middle school also have a house principal structure, so many of our 5th grade friends will also get to know some of our house principals. So I would say between all of us, we're going to have a nice base of support for all of our incoming 5th and 6th graders. So.
Just on behalf of my elementary principal colleagues, we're very sad about that, but they are in excellent hands with the administration up at the middle school.
So we have another question about students. So we have to, in order to maintain social distancing, we need to put students in 2 classrooms rather than 1. And there's a question about who will be working with, supervising, assisting the students who are in that 2nd classroom. I don't know, maybe Damien, you want to take this one?
Sure, I can start and I'll ask anyone to jump in on this. This is a challenge, there's no question about that. As you increase the number of spaces where students will be, we need to have additional adults to cover those spaces. So one of the tasks that is really in front of our principals right now is looking at the staffing in each of our schools, the number of adults, their certification areas, their specialty, their roles within a school, and trying to line up the right people with the right groups of students in the right spaces. So it's a puzzle for sure. But at this point in time, I think we've made some good headway with it. I think we are getting more and more comfortable with those patterns of matching students to staff in those various spaces. Again, ideally, this is not to be viewed as just a supervisory challenge, but this is really an instructional challenge for us. We want students engaged, we want them participating in the learning activities, and we want the right people in the rooms to be able to support those activities as well. Alan, principals, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Just like you said, Damien, it's a big puzzle right now, but we're trying to look at it as an opportunity to be able to provide a lot of intervention services as well with our reading staff and math staff and ENL staff and special education staff as well.
There was go ahead.
No, as we finalize room usage and look to see how we cluster students, those needs are emerging as we define the staff to look in those spaces. But I think someone said it earlier, we're trying to first identify certified staff that we can push in to those alternate sections so that we can continue to provide that continuity of instruction, even though it is in 2 locations. So.
There was a related question about planning time, and will our faculty have additional planning time to do the work that it will take to plan for instruction, for remote learning, and to coordinate with other adults? Any thoughts on planning time?
So I can start on that. I think, we're very cognizant of the need for teachers to be able to plan, especially when they have new adults, new colleagues that they will be working with to support students in new spaces. That is going to be a challenge for sure. I think as we develop the schedules in each one of the schools, I think that's one of the priorities, is to make sure that we have built-in planning time for our teachers. I'm also going to be putting out to teachers very soon, probably by the end of this week, an opportunity for teachers to engage in some, I would say, pre-planning before the start of the school year throughout the month of August, where they can both plan individually for instruction, but they can also come in and work with colleagues who they might be partnered with or teamed with as they go into September. We may not know that within the early part of August. It may be a little bit later in August when we know what those partnerships and teams might look like. But we do want to avail some additional opportunities for teachers to begin the planning process before the start of the school year, which we of course know is going to be incredibly busy with all of the things that we've discussed tonight.
So really the last little topic, and it's not really a little topic, and Regan, I'm going to turn to you. So much this depends on the availability of our amazing staff to actually be here. What happens if we have a staff member who does in fact find him or herself having to quarantine for 14 days? How do we handle that? What does that mean for how that individual uses his or her sick time? What will that look like?
Thanks for the question, Marie, and good evening, everyone. That's a great question and something that we've been working on throughout the summer, and I'd like to give a strong thank you to our friends at Honeywell Law for putting together a terrific flow chart for issues and situations that have come up. And so to answer your question, if an employee is being asked to quarantine because they're showing symptoms or they've been advised by a healthcare provider to quarantine, then under the Federal Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act that was enacted back at the beginning of April, they would have a total of 80 hours at regular rate of pay. So they don't have to tap into their own accruals. It's paid for by that. We have a special code that we've been using for situations that we've seen already, in the summer.
So they shouldn't be too worried about that at this point.
No, and not at all. But and we did see a lot of questions in the forum about what about staff with underlying health conditions. And so I want to let everyone know that email went out on Friday, and hard copies are going out for people who don't access their email very much about what the protocol and the process is for that. So staff should have a great idea that's in your email if you still want to know. And by all means, call the office and we'll be happy to help you through that situation.
Thanks so much, Regan. So I am mindful of the time, and I just want to ask the panel, we went through a ton of questions, but I couldn't actually get to every single one I highlighted earlier today, but I'm wondering from your collective perspectives, if there's anything that I missed that we should share with our viewers tonight before we wrap up.
I'd just like to say, Marie, this came up, we had a PTA meeting last week and some parents asked about how they can help prepare their children. And I think having students wear masks right now will be a big benefit to them. We don't want them to have to put on masks for the first time on the first day of school. People should be comfortable with those and experienced with those, and hopefully students will know how to put them on and take them off. But students should have some opportunities to wear those before the start of school.
And I just want to comment, Dr. Wiles, that we've had about 60 students in person for 3 weeks this summer in our extended school year program at Guilderland Elementary School. And the hope in seeing them on campus has shown me that they've adapted really well to be back into their routine and their structure and seeing their teachers. And many of them are choosing to wear masks and adapting to wearing masks. All our staff are wearing facial coverings and PPE and teaching with the PPE, and our students are getting used to that and adjusting, and in their classrooms they're able to get up and move around and dance and listen to music and play games. And our teaching staff has been immensely creative and planning an extended school year program that meets the needs of our students, gets them back into their routines, increasing their stamina and attention. So I'm really hopeful for when we return more students to campus that our kids are really resilient and they are doing really well this summer.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Lisa. So I'll say this to those of you who are watching tonight. We will be building a FAQ, frequently asked question page on our website with the questions that we were able to answer tonight. And if there were some that we didn't get to, we will try our best to address them. And I'll seek some feedback if this was a helpful way to spend an hour and a little bit together. We can do another one of these later in August once we have more answers to more questions and our plan is more solidified. If we were to do that, I would suggest that this illustrious team actually meet in person in the LGI, and we can live stream to our community from there. I know our Board of Education is planning to be back in the LGI in person for its August 11th board meeting. And as many of the people on the panel know, we have been doing more and more in-person meetings throughout the summer, practicing social distancing, wearing masks, and enjoying the actual company of our colleagues as opposed to the virtual company of our colleagues. So having said that, I want to thank everybody on the call tonight. I want to thank our Board of Education for their support in this activity. I want to thank also everyone who filled out our little questionnaire and sent in a question. And I encourage you to continue to do that at that reopening address that I shared earlier that will also be available on our website. So having said that, thank you everyone. Have a great evening and we'll look forward to seeing you all again.